Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch.
And I'm Pops.
Welcome back. This is going to be our NFC West. So we got 2 more episodes with the off-season breakdown. Today we'll be attacking the NFC West, looking at the, runner-up to the Super Bowl and the Niners. Really strong division, I would say, still behind them. Even with the Cardinals, they, had some good moments last year that they beat some teams they probably shouldn't have, like the Cowboys, even though I would say, Cowboys can lose to anybody. But before we get into that, instead of doing guess the player, I've given some of these to Maul, and we didn't talk about this. So I think this is a good field question.
Mm-hmm.
Super Bowl's on the line. You're at the 1 yard line. Of
Don't ask me
any running back in history, who are you going to give the ball to?
Marshawn,
I thought about this,
dude.
Well, it was funny because it was an NFL highlights of Marshawn Lynch, and I was sitting there and I was like, I don't know if there was a better guy than Lynch.
Yeah.
That I'd give the ball to. Like, don't get me wrong, Barry Sanders has incredible agility, but he's not the guy that I'm like, dude, if he sort of got hit, Barry's not that power guy.
Mm-hmm.
I love Walter. I mean, Walter would jump right over the pile. You got Jim Brown, but I never really got to watch Jim Brown play at all.
And I would argue too, you look back at that 85 Bears Super Bowl, they gave it to the fridge instead of Walter. So Walter had a very similar scenario happen to him that Lynch had.
Yeah,
they won the Super Bowl, but Walter didn't get the touchdown.
I know. And I saw a documentary about that, and it said, Ditka, I don't think he's lying about it, but he clearly is like, I didn't think about it in the time, and it really ate at Walter Payton that he didn't score in the Super Bowl. And then, Walter ends up getting cancer and dying. And I think that's always stuck with Ditka years later of not giving Walter the ball in that scenario. Don't get me wrong, it's like a Refrigerator Perry is a great story, but Walter not scored in a Super Bowl that you blew out the Patriots, it just feels incomplete when you throw that little side note of trivia out there in that scenario. Outside of Marshawn Lynch, who would be your second guy? And I know this is tough because I was surprised that you said Lynch, but I had to phrase it the 1 yard for the Super Bowl, and that sort of leads you down that path.
Yeah, 100%. Man, if I had to go with somebody today, I would want Derrick Henry. In my opinion, if I had to choose one guy from today, he would get that 1 yard. Even after getting hit. I have to chew on it about who I'd want from us growing up.
Ooh, the only thing I love Derrick. If they ran the right play, which is just run it downhill, I'd argue that Derrick's probably the best one to give it to. I think the second best, which is nuts because I'm not going to say Christian McCaffrey. I really like Saquon.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Saquon he's a really tough physical runner. Downhill, the only guy that I can really come to mind from our childhood that has retired now, but I still think was just a beast, underappreciated, Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, AP, yeah.
God, dude, that dude was he was incredible. It's sort of sad. I guess he's losing pretty much all his possessions right now because he's auctioning off everything. I don't know how bad of debt he's in, but he's in it.
Yeah, it's a terrible story of, the classic come to the league, spend all the money, and then have nobody tell you how to spend that money while you're still spending the money. And yeah, now that's why he played for so long. He's yeah, I can still play, but also here's all these stories of all this money and back taxes and everything else he owed. And it's now he just ran out of playing years and he's not worth well, let me take that back. He's not worth what he needs to get himself out of that hole without selling stuff.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because I think even more when people know you're in a need, they're less willing to throw some of the money that they probably would have paid.
Mm-hmm.
at an auction, and he's just not as popular as he was. If he had sold his NFL MVP trophy a year after he won it, he probably rakes in 10 times as much as it's going for now. It's just part of it.
And that's the thing, like, you kind of overshadow, like Favre's last couple of years with the Vikings. You're just like, everybody thinks of Favre taking them to the NFC Championship game. It's like, who was their running back, dude? Like, let's be honest about who really got them there. It was AP.
I mean, another guy on that team that I feel like people, even I think Maul even didn't recognize his name when I threw it out, was Simeon Rice.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that dude was putting up stats with Favre, and Bernard Berrien was there. I mean, they had, and then the other key piece I think of that whole team was Percy Harvin. I mean, they had some lethality at offense from that team. They should have won. I mean, Favre, everyone's going to sit back and they look at that situation. They're like, Favre shouldn't have thrown that pass. 100%. I get that. I think that when Favre took off running, though, he had 10 yards in front of him. It didn't help that they had, that was the bounty gate where they were paying players to say, hey, whatever you do, intentionally hurt this dude.
Yeah.
I get that they suspended Sean Payton for a year, but the fact that defensive guys weren't also suspended for a whole year from the league, really surprising when you think about sort of the totality of that. Like, can you imagine if they did that today to Patrick Mahomes? Like, they would have, I don't even know if a franchise would exist.
Yeah, they'd be out of the league.
Yeah, if they played like that. So there were so many plays. I remember AP fumbled, Berrien fumbled. There were just, the Vikings cost themselves that game early and often. And talk about a Super Bowl of all Super Bowls, it would have been Favre and the Vikings versus Manning and the Colts. That would have been legendary from that standpoint. But Drew Brees ended up pulling out and get the first and only for the Saints. Well, that was a good little diatribe. Getting into talking about some old players. Taking a look at the NFC West. I guess we can start with the Cardinals. A lot of rumors right now on the market for them. They're saying that they want 3 first-round picks for someone to trade up to number 4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that happening. All the reports say they're pretty set on drafting
Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, Harrison Jr. The team that's most reported as trying to move up is the Vikings, and everyone says the Vikings are going to try to move up and select J.J. McCarthy if he's there, which will be interesting. And they're saying if he doesn't go at 4 with the Cardinals, he'll go to the Chargers, sitting right behind him at 5. Not to the Chargers, but the Vikings will trade up with the Chargers. I sort of take a look at the Cardinals. They've got Murray, who, in my opinion, is sort of like Daniel Jones. He's locked into a deal that really makes it so you're sort of stuck with what you got for right now because it's just too much money in dead cap space to put on. But outside of him, dude, I don't really know. The Cardinals need wide receiver help. I know they got James Conner there at running back, and they got Paris Campbell, or not Paris Campbell. Yeah, I think it was Paris Campbell. Paris something. The offensive tackle last year from Ohio State that's played really well for them. But outside of that, I look at the Cardinals, and it's still sort of a mess. Where are you sitting at with the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think personally they're probably going to be at the bottom of the division again this year, just with how things are going right now. I mean, James Conner, he had those good years in Pittsburgh, and then he got traded out there, to get a little bit of money, but the production doesn't seem to be the same out there in Arizona. And obviously, when you don't have a quarterback in Kyler Murray, they trade away D-Hop. Like there's a lot of question marks, surrounding this team, and then also, selling off their defense as well. So they've got a lot of gaps. Obviously, the rumor's been Marvin Harrison Jr. Some people are talking a little crazy, no trades that they could see the Cardinals going after a quarterback at the number 4 pick, which I just don't see it. Like, is Kyler a system guy? No, but I think he's shown and proven when he's healthy, he's a, middle to top of the pack quarterback. Just by the way that he's so elusive, and he's pretty accurate for being a mobile runner, in comparison to other guys in the league. I mean, after all, he used to sling a baseball, 100 mile an hour across the field. So I think as far as their quarterback, they've got that set down. The next piece after that wide receiver is going to have to be, going to their defense. They don't really have an edge guy that's able to get them pressure. And I mean, it's what we've been talking about all years. Like, if you don't have somebody on the front line, to get home, like, your defense is already at a disadvantage in the safeties, and DBs are just, it's a matter of time before they start getting exposed as well.
Yeah, the offensive tackle's name was Paris Johnson Jr., just so I get that right. Paris Campbell is not the right name. That's the Colts player. But with I will disagree with you a little bit. I'm not a fan of Kyler Murray, mainly because, don't get me wrong, from an athletic standpoint, yeah, he's amazing. Like, keeping plays alive, taking off running. Like, there's really not a linebacker, maybe even a safety, that you can put on him from a speed standpoint that's going to make it so that he's not going to gain, 5 yards every single play if he took off running. The issue is that I think the playoffs with Mahomes really proves it, that if you want to be competitive in the NFL, you have to have a guy that it's not just like accurate, but lethal. Like, Maul sort of called it with Brady, that he was just surgical. Like, he didn't wow you with these huge Patrick Mahomes off balance throws, but at the same time, like, when he had a dude open, the GOAT did not miss. Like, and that's so tough to replicate. And when you, especially in their division, you just sort of think about the other teams. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't want to say out on Purdy, but I'm not sold, I think, as everyone else is. But you got Matt Stafford, who is clutch. Like, the Rams are a lot better team than what they should be, based upon like all the draft picks and everything else they've given up to win that one Super Bowl, because Stafford's still in the building. And then you go to the Seahawks. Yes, Geno Smith's not the best, but the rest of the team's really solid. So from that standpoint, I sort of look at the Cardinals, and I get that you can sit back and say, well, he doesn't have a lot of talent. He had Hollywood Brown. He had D-Hop. Have they made plays? Yes. But from the standpoint of Murray being that dude, I don't think he's not a franchise quarterback that I'd want to build around. But the problem is the Cardinals have already paid him like that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They're locked.
And that was the worst part too, is that, when it came out, that whole deal about his study time being in the contract, like, that should have been the biggest red flag that you could have possibly had. It's like, all right, we already know this guy's not committed, but we're going to take his talent over his commitment and just overlook that. And look where it's gotten him.
Teams do this all the time. They get into this almost fear of, they don't know what else is out there. And so they're just willing to sacrifice by keeping the person that they know is not the answer. It's like, we know this guy isn't the franchise quarterback that we want to be. Just like when you're having to talk about, hey, we need you to put X amount of hours not into Call of Duty every week and into the playbook, then, like you said, that should be like, hey, we shouldn't be paying you this type of money.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you also look at the Cardinals and you're just like, they make so many bad decisions. What's nuts is they got to a Super Bowl. Probably should have won. Larry Fitzgerald was insane that whole game with, they have Kurt Warner, who really was at the back end of his career. He wasn't even the starter. Matt Leinart was supposed to be the guy, and then Leinart's sort of the same as Murray. Like, Leinart wasn't studying, and he's open and honest about that. I'm not just throwing that out there because that's what I think. He has openly said that, coming out of USC, he just sort of thought his talent was going to be enough, that he didn't have to be as prepared as he would have liked to have been. He talked about that on that documentary of Vince Young. But I'm in the same boat, though, in terms of sort of the outlook for the Cardinals. There's really not enough that they could do this draft to make it that much better. Don't get me wrong, having Marvin Harrison Jr. will help Murray. But at the same time, it's like, well, who's the number 2 and the number 3? Who's your tight end? Defensively, where you go, and it's not the stacked roster that it is of yesteryear. So we both have, Arizona in the bottom. What else you got about them?
Yeah, I was just going to tack on just, kind of the way that they finished up the season. They were in ball games. Like, they beat the Eagles. They barely lost to the Seahawks. My Bears beat them, but they beat the Steelers in December. Like, they were in games, like against the Texans. It was a 5-point game. Texans won obviously, but it was a 5-point game. They beat the Falcons. Like, they were in so many games. You've already mentioned they beat the Cowboys early on in the season. Everybody's like, "Oh, the Cowboys are already done," and I mean, sure enough, that was a big enough indicator. But the new coaching staff that they brought in, I do think that they will pose problems for teams. I think it will be better than it was this past season. But I think that they're starting to move somewhat in the right direction outside of the Kyler Murray contract situation.
The Vikings make the most sense. And what a lot of people have been arguing is the Vikings own 2 first-round picks. The Texans traded with the Vikings for a first-round pick. So the Texans gave up their other first-round draft pick for the Vikings to have 2, mainly for the Vikings to use as leverage to move up. I sort of look at it from the standpoint of the Cardinals, and I know they want 3 first-round picks. I would take the 2 and maybe a second rounder if that's what it took from the Vikings, because it's heavy in corner this draft. You definitely have some defensive linemen that I think are going to fall in the draft. The kid from Illinois, Newton, you have a lot of guys that are going to, I think, be sitting because teams are going to be hopping up, especially if 1 through 4 go, and, Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and then JJ. You only got a few other quarterbacks, mainly Bo Nix and Penix, sitting there. I think teams are going to get desperate and look at it in a different light and start hopping. You're going to have other players fall, which if you're the Cardinals, you sit back and go, that's what we don't want a quarterback. We want some other help. It'd be nice to have Marvin Harrison Jr., but at the same time, I know the Vikings are sitting at 11. There's still a good chance that either Rome, maybe Neighbors, but for sure, like Brian Thomas, you got Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell. You have plenty of talent there that I think helps. And if Mahomes didn't prove last year that you don't really need a wide receiver to win a Super Bowl, I don't know what else does. Speaking of that, I guess next episode we'll talk about Kansas City wide receivers and why they need to slow down Henry Ruggs without murdering someone. Oh my goodness. But outside of the Cardinals, where are you sitting next in the division from the bottom up?
Yeah, I think the next is going to be the Seahawks.
Is that just from quarterback?
Well, they're also, I mean, here's the thing. They got Mike McDonald now, new coach coming in. I think there's going to be a lot of question marks of where he's going to take the franchise, and, if there's going to be any cultural issues, I guess, from shifting from, the almost 20 years of Pete Carroll, to now moving into this new regime. Like, what's going to happen there? But yeah, man, like, obviously Geno, he got the comeback player of the year 2 seasons ago, and then last year, he wasn't hot garbage, but it was definitely a easy regression to witness. Like, this was
It was
not
the old Geno.
Yeah, it was the old Geno. And it's just like, man, what happened? Like, you've got all these weapons. You had DK, you got Lockett, you got Will Dissly, like all these guys that they had, and it's just like, what are we doing? That was so different from last season to this season. So we'll see what the new coach can do. I think they need help on the offensive line. That was kind of the biggest thing that I saw. The gaps, they needed both tackles and guards for the biggest holes on their roster needs, because everywhere else is pretty much stacked. And the offensive line is what gets the job done for the offense. So I think that could have a little bit of an impact on his season last year. I'd have to go back and look at how many sacks were given up. But, yeah, man, like, Geno's obviously a big question mark to lead the new offense of Mike McDonald's.
For me, this is a team that I would watch in the draft. that I would not be shocked if 1 through 4 go quarterback, that with their first round pick, they either take Bo Nix or Penix. Like, that to me makes a lot of sense with Seattle, just because I think everyone realizes that Geno is not their guy. He's more of a stopgate solution. Lock, Drew Lock's on the move. I sit back and look at sort of that quarterback room. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Penix comes in and starts or Bo Nix. I think it's a scenario where they ride the bench for a little bit. Hey, be behind Geno, but I would not be shocked to see them start by the end of the year. It just puts some pressure on Geno to either, hey, perform, but we'd like to get this guy behind you a little bit of time to sit and get accustomed to the league before being thrown into the fire. But from the standpoint of a team and what they have, I wouldn't be opposed to having a rookie quarterback in their scenario, because of you've got the big three that you talked about, Smith and Jigba, you got Lockett, you've got Metcalf, Disley's not a bad tight end. And then at running back, you got Kenneth Walker, who's really done really well when healthy. I look at that just sort of offense itself and you go, hey, I don't really have any problems. I don't want the Seahawks to spend a first round pick because I don't think those guys are worth it in there. And I could definitely see him getting some help on defense, which I think is your question with, the departure of a head coach, especially when you think about what Pete Carroll did for them. It was the Legion of Boom. They've always had a really strong defense. So when he's leaving, how does that replicate? Are you still going to be a defensive-minded team that it's just tough to play? Mainly their defense keeps them in games. That's the big thing I'm interested to see from Seattle this upcoming season. They lose Bobby Wagner. He goes, which I get, older dude, maybe it's not as fast as he used to be. Still a leader inside that organization. He's gone to the Commanders. It will be interesting for me to see how Seattle shapes up. Yes, I have the Cardinals at the bottom. If you told me that the Seattle finished at the bottom of the division, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm actually looking, Geno got sacked only 31 times last year, but you look at the games that he got sacked the most, it was the 49ers, it was Baltimore, and then it was also Cincinnati. So when you look at the problems that were posed, from those defensive lines, it's funny that the Rams, weren't able to get home with Aaron Donald as much, but, you just look at those guys and you're like, well, against the biggest competition, the offensive line showed to be a problem, so maybe they'll beef that up. And who knows, maybe Geno just had a bad season. And I agree kind of what you're saying is, hey, Geno's on his way out already anyways. He's been kind of a journeyman in a sense. I know he's held out in Seattle and got the contract extension from them after the great year that he had. But maybe, like you said, hey, you start the first couple of games and now we're going to hand the keys over to this rookie and see what he's got.
Yeah. It will be interesting for them, and it's mainly because of the other two teams that we've yet to talk about with the Rams and the Niners. I think the Niners are probably in the best position, especially now that Aaron Donald has retired. I think of that when Saban retired, Nike put out this saying that was like, college football hasn't slept this long and forever, or slept this good and forever. And I think about offensive lines in the NFC West have not slept this good in a long time, knowing they're not going to have to go against Aaron Donald. Because that dude, it was unreal. Like, I saw this, you've seen that Vince McMahon where he's like sort of getting choked up, and one of them was like, Dad, tell me about Aaron Donald. Yeah. And it was just pictures of legitimately anywhere between 3 to 5 offensive linemen, literally the entire offensive line at some point
on one dude
blocking Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
I mean, he won him that Super Bowl. You brought it up a few weeks ago that if he doesn't hit Burrow's got Jamar Chase going down the sideline, uncovered, beating Ramsey. Like, he's going to hit him. Like, that was 6. Aaron Donald won them that game. I sit back and I look at the Rams. The Rams, the thing that they do exceptionally well is they have the innate ability to find wide receivers later in the draft. You look at Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. They've always been able to find their guys, mainly because Sean McVay knows exactly what they're looking for. They have their quarterback in Stafford. The Rams are still lethal. Like, they went toe-to-toe with the Lions. Could have I think if you had flipped home field for the Lions and had them play in LA, it's probably a different outcome to that game. And honestly, I would not be surprised to see the Rams beat the Niners for the division next year, just because it's hard to replicate success, but Stafford's been able to do it time and time again. You look at the Niners and you look at who all, they lost on defense with Eric Armstrong. They're probably going to lose Brandon Ayuk. They're losing some players in some positions, and that everyone's going to be gunning for them next year, being the defending NFC champs. I think it will be tough. It'll be tough for the Niners to keep replicating that success. Purdy's going to have to continue to improve more than he did last year. I don't know. If you had to hold the gun to my head, and honestly, I'd pick the Rams to finish first in the division next year, which is crazy, but it's just because of the draft. Like, I really like how the Rams, they find talent and they're able to use it perfectly inside either their offense or their defense. Yes, they lose Aaron Donald, but it's tough. Where are you sitting with those other two teams?
Yeah, I think if we go down the path of the Rams, obviously their biggest glaring hole is not playing a 3 technique anymore. On that defense, because let's look at their offense. I mean, Akers, in the backfield, you still got Kupp, you got Nakua. Is Matthew Stafford going to stay healthy? Like that's the biggest thing with him is our man going to be able to stay in the pocket for them? Because age obviously is creeping up on him with his shoulder, his neck. The injuries that he's had, just even the time that he's been with the Rams. But when he's out there, just like you said, I mean, he's lethal, leading that offense. But the biggest question is, hey, Raheem Morris just left. He took over with Atlanta. Now we've got Chris Shula, who's the grandson of the legendary coach Don Shula. And I'm just curious how, moving again, same thing that we kind of talked about with how the Seahawks are moving with the new head coach. It's not a new head coach, it's a new coordinator for the Rams. But what is he going to do to improve that defense? Because I would say that besides Aaron Donald, that defense of the Rams was, could be suspect at times. And the only thing that helped them out was that they had such a prolific offense through McVay on the other side of the ball that's keeping them in ball games versus, the defense.
McVay for me, is the best offensive coach in the NFL. And I know Shanahan, people regard him high, but especially after his track record in Super Bowls here lately, I have to give the edge to McVay. The only game that comes to mind, and it's only because I did one of those trivia posts about it, McVay has the unfortunate title of being one of 3 Super Bowl teams to have not scored a touchdown in a Super Bowl when they got beat by the Pats 13-3. Yep. Now you sit back and you go, oh, well, who's the other guy? The other guy is Patrick Mahomes did it against Tampa Bay. And then before them, I think it was the Dolphins against the Cowboys. They only put up 3 points. No one's been shut out. But outside of that, that was sort of the turning point for the Rams where they were like, hey, Goff's not our guy. Yep. Which, as surprising as that was, they said, hey, we need to find a quarterback. They go out, they get Jared Goff. Now they have, or not Jared Goff, they go out and get Matt Stafford in a trade with Jared Goff. They have their guy. Offensively, when Stafford's healthy and on the field, dude, they are lethal. They were a very, very good football team. Changing a defensive coordinator, losing, in my opinion, the greatest defensive tackle to have ever played the game. Yeah. There's going to be a major hole there. I really like the Bobby Brown kid that they have sitting there. He plays really, really, or not Bobby Brown. His last name is Brown. He played for the Vols. Bobby Brown plays for the Panthers. He just got a big deal.
You're talking about the new dude that they just got, Byron Young?
Byron Young. Dude, that dude, beast.
Yeah.
Beast. Plays really, really well. they'll be fine. Like the Rams will do Rams things. I think the biggest question for them going into the draft is they definitely need help at corner. They need some help in the secondary. Now that they have to replace Aaron Donald, could they possibly go defensive lineman? Yeah, I really think that that's a position that it tends to fall into the second and third round just because it's tough to use that much of a high pick on a guy that honestly is never going to touch the football unless he's sacking the quarterback, which when that happens, huge impactful play. But you look at it from the standpoint of, especially if there's a wide receiver sitting there that Sean McVay's in love with, you put them, you got Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and somebody else. Good luck. Like those guys know how to, they catch everything. That's like, God bless, are good. So,
and that's the thing. I mean, you've kind of got a question mark too, at the tight end position, because Tyler Higbee blew out his ACL, in the Lions game there towards the end of the season. So be curious, how well he's able to recover that, whether or not they choose to go in a different route from that position as well. Because, I mean, he was a big target for Stafford all season long. I mean, I think that's what I love about traditional quarterbacks is, like they find a way to get their tight end the ball. I mean, and you see it time and time again. Like it's easy for a tight end to get lost. I mean, just look at obviously Travis Kelce is the easiest, easiest example. But you go back to Gronk, you go back to Peyton and Dallas Clark. Like you go through all these lists of guys, Romo and Jason Witten. Like I think Higbee and Stafford were starting to develop that for how long Higbee's been with the Rams.
Yeah, the tight end, it's such a conundrum, mainly because I look at some good quarterbacks in the league, mainly like the name that immediately pops to mind that I'm like, oh, really good quarterback. I can't really think of his tight end, which is the Bengals. Like, which last year they had Irv Smith Jr., who he was an Alabama guy, went to Minnesota, couldn't make it there, just kept getting hurt, had same injury bug in Cincinnati. I sort of look at Cincy and I'm just like, man, like they pay for a tight end. The same with Aaron.
He had Hayden Hurst for a little while.
He did. He had Hayden Hurst before him. I don't think he, well, actually, I don't think he caught him. He may have caught him at the end of his time at Cincinnati. I remember Tyler Eifert. Dude, that dude put up fantasy points like it was going out of business for a while. I mean, he was unstoppable, and then he just fell off the map. And you think about Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, they never had a tight end. Like Jermichael Finley was the only guy that they had. Once he hurt his neck, it was over. Which, on a side note, that's the pick. Now that it's been so long since me and you sat down and talked about the AFC East, all the different moves they made. One of the moves I see them doing in the draft, if he falls to him, is them taking Brock Bowers, which I'm just like, God, they'd be stacked. Like,
that'd be insane.
That would be the perfect fit for Rodgers with him, just because it's like, dude, that dude's going to get him the ball. Like, so for me, taking a look at the Rams, you talk about Higbee, like, they're a little far in the draft, like we talked about for offense. I really think it's going to be a defensive guy. And then on the other side, where we're talking about the Niners, you sit back and look at them and you're like, well, how can this team get better? And that, to me, this is a huge question mark for the Niners. Is you look at the team last year and on paper against the Chiefs, dude, they should have put away the Chiefs in the first half.
100%.
Like, that was the worst Chiefs team that we've seen in a long, long time. And I'll fight people till I die in my grave. The reason they lost is because of Purdy. Like, there were just times, I know that there was us texting back and forth. I still remember Debo coming across the middle on like a 15-yard in route and just a little crosser, he overshoots him. And there were throws in that game that you just sort of sit back and you go, dude, like, they missed. Like, it took a wide receiver trick play, throwing it back to McCaffrey for them to get their first score. That there's just the other thing I think about is, I know I said it after the Super Bowl, like when Mahomes throws that pick and they go 3 and out and have to punt it back to him, like if that was Brady or if that was Mahomes, like they're getting a field goal. Like, sorry, dude, you just cost your team 3 points. Like, we're getting something out of this. And them coming away with nothing, their defense stands tall again. And then Ray McLeod fumbles the punt. Chiefs take the lead. It was just like, for as good as the Niners are during the regular season, and they are usually in the playoffs, dude, they fumbled the bag when it comes to the pressure moments in the Super Bowl. And you just sort of sit back, and I don't know how the team can get better offensively outside of the positions they have. They got the best running back in football right now in Christian McCaffrey. Greg Kittle is still I'd say a top 5 tight end in the league.
100%.
Is Debo as good as people think? I don't think so, but I think he's great for how they use him. Could they use wide receiver help? Absolutely. Are they going to get that at 31 in the draft? Maybe. Like, could Xavier Worthy be? I know that's who you had the Chiefs take in our mock draft. The Niners need help. Where do you sort of see them getting over the hump and getting that first Super Bowl victory?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd make you happy, but they got rid of Nick Bosa. I mean, they owe the guy too much money to do that. I look back to, their defense was probably the lymphatic, as well of that game, outside of Purdy.
When Greenlaw blew out his Achilles, that really
that didn't help when you're running on the field and your Achilles pops, and then all they do is target his backup the rest of that drive.
The rest of the game.
Yeah. That just doesn't help you at all. But, they lost Chase Young, and, say what you will, he's still a number on the field. They need help at the defensive end, that edge position. Their cornerbacks as well, they need a little help there. And then the really big question is what's going to happen with Ayuk. He's already came out saying he's not happy, even though he's under contract. Like, which direction are they going to go with him? But you said it, man. Like, how can this offense get better? And I just don't know, because their offensive line is coming back. They've got the cheapest deal ever for the amount that they have to pay Purdy versus most of his production. I mean, he's got to be the best option. Like, as far as that pay to perform ratio works out, like, he's got to be the top, like the best deal for that, regardless of what you think of him. Obviously the quarterback, but they don't have the money to be able to, plug in a big name guy. And there's really nobody left in the free agent world, unless you want Jimmy G again, or, bring him back for a farewell tour. But
and that's my argument. It's not me trying to hate on Purdy in terms of I think he's just a terrible quarterback. It's not that. It's more of based upon the offense that he has with these pieces. And we sort of saw it this year. Like, when Debo and Christian were out, they were losing games. Like, they looked terrible. And it was one of these ones where it's like, hey, man, if you're going to be the franchise quarterback for the 49ers, let's get something straight. Running backs don't last. The fact that Christian's made it as far as he has, hats off to him.
Yeah.
But it's tough. Like, how many more years do you really think you're going to get out of McCaffrey? Like 3, maybe.
Tops.
Same with Debo. Like, Debo's been put through the grinder at the position of wide receiver. Like, I'm trying to think of a wide receiver that I'm like, oh yeah, he's been good for about 10 straight years, outside of maybe like Tyreek Hill. Like, and even him, I mean, that was 20, I guess it's almost been 10 years, 2017 or so that he came into the league. It's tough. And for them to, because eventually, like you said, for the performance to dollar, they're only paying him like $870,000 a year. Great deal. But when you give him that Daniel Jones contract and now you can't pay other positions, that's where you start. And that's why they're getting rid of Ayuk. They get rid of possibly, or not Ayuk, Eric Armstead, possibly Ayuk. It's because you know that this rookie quarterback's about to end. And when it does end, you're going to have to pay him a ton of money forces you into the other position, which sort of leads me to this question. This, I know it's a long-winded to get to this. Has the window in the Niners closed?
I would say the fact of Nick Bosa's contract, I would say yes. Like, you know, when they pumped all that money into him, and go back even to the Jimmy G contract, like some of the moves that the money that they gave some of these guys early on when John Lynch is trying to change this franchise around, like, did we see progress? Yes. But like, I think too, there's some buyer's remorse in some of the contracts that, you know, Lynch had made. And I think Nick Bosa is one of them because, you know, they're not able to free up the money that they need for other pieces to supplement. I mean, they were able to get Chase Young, but let's be honest, what did Chase Young do for them? Not a whole lot of anything, you know? So I think they're missing pieces because of money allocated to, you know, CMC and Nick Bosa and Debo as well.
And I don't want to slander the guys on the other side of the line, but when the Broncos had Von Miller, I couldn't tell you who the other guy was.
Mm-hmm.
When the Packers had Reggie White, could not tell you who the other guy was. Like, when you have your dude, you really just need someone to not be a liability on the other side for them to go get Chase Young, pretty much saying, like, we need some help. Like, that to me is sort of like this red flag of just what you're talking about, which is, you know, they really didn't want to pay him. They were trying to string out that contract for as long as they could. And then they get into a position where it's like, well, we either pay him or we don't have anyone. And NFL teams, when they get put into that situation, they always fold. Like, rarely do I see a team stand and they're like, no, I am not paying you. Which is funny. The only team that I can think of right now that's doing that is the Cowboys with Dak Prescott. Is they're just like, no, you're either going to win next year or, you know, your contract's up for negotiation again. I agree with you. When you sink money, and this is like a huge thing, they never really talk about it on SportsCenter or any other place. They never really get to the conversation of cap depth and how when you start paying these guys, dude, it's going to have ramifications 3 to 4 years from now that are unseen in the moment. In the moment, you sit back and you're like, oh, great deal. But go ask the Bills. I mean, where they're at. Dude, I mean, Josh Allen's going to be throwing 40-yard bombs to himself at this point. Like, I look at how they've played out in the Texans. I just want to change note. What a fleece of a deal for the Texans.
Yeah.
For Stephon. Now, you said it in text message. I didn't want to be the first one to take credit for it, but you were like, if Diggs isn't a cancer by week 4, like, then the Texans got the best deal of all time.
Yeah.
Because they forced Stephon to put all his contract into this year, which it all falls on the Bills. So the Bills eat $30 million in dead cap space. They're only paying Diggs like $2 million or something this year. He's an unrestricted free agent, which you're pretty much saying, like, hey, if you ball out, you're going to get a monster deal this year. We just want you to ball out for 1 year for us to win. Like, great deal. And then you look at the Niners and it's like, well, how much money are you going to pay Brandon Ayuk? And I don't want to like sound mean towards Brandon Ayuk, but it's like, for him, he falls into the same category as me, as like T. Higgins and Boyd with the Bengals. Like, they have a number one guy. His name's Jamar Chase. That's the guy that you're going to pay. The other two dudes, like, I've seen Boyd drop a bunch. Higgins, like, when Jamar Chase is out, you know what I don't see? Like, them dudes just like step
blowing
up and
up.
Blowing up. Like,
yeah.
I don't see that. Like, Ayuk's a good player, but at the same time, it was like, I didn't see him beating the Chiefs corners. Like, in a team that was pretty bad this year, I didn't see him doing it, but somehow MVS is torching the Niners when it matters most. Like, that's my biggest, like, gripe with sort of these teams is they get into a position where it's like, dude, you've got Christian McCaffrey. You've got Debo. You've got Kittle. Let that dude walk. Like, see, dog, we'll find there's plenty of wide receivers in this draft. If anything, they're heavy on wide receivers. If the Rams can find Puka Nacua, not in the first few rounds, then we can go find somebody. So that heartache for me with just how teams operate in terms of who they're out there and grabbing.
Well, I think it's funny too that you already brought this up with the whole Kyler Murray situation. Like, again, we've got another example, of a team being backed into a corner and just like, oh, we got the fear of missing out. Like, we better pay this guy, otherwise, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it happens too much in the NFL, and it's why teams struggle. And honestly, one thing I've noticed is like every single day I make these guess the players for TikTok and Instagram. Dude, there's some teams that like the Niners are a great example. Dude, 2010s, like looking through their roster, you're just like, wolf. Like, dude, it's like this is the reason why sometimes on those little slides, like you're getting linebackers and defensive linemen. Because I'm like, dude, they didn't have anybody. Like the Browns are a key team that I'm like, dude, unless I start going back to the Bernie Kosar days, like I am hurting for Browns guys. Just because it's like they go through a plethora of guys. And you think about it before, like from the time the Niners never lost a Super Bowl until Steve Young left. Steve Young wins, beats the absolute brakes off the then San Diego Chargers. Fast forward to now, they've lost 3 in a row. Lose to the Ravens with Flacco and now twice to the Chiefs. In between then and now, it's like, yeah, you got Jimmy G, Jeff Garcia. They went out and people don't even talk about the fact they gave away 3 first-rounders for Trey Lance.
Well, they had Alex Smith as well.
Alex Smith, that, he was this is like my argument for why he wasn't a franchise quarterback. Like, was he a good quarterback? Yeah. Like, yeah. I think I told Maul this last week. We were sort of getting, it was funny because he agreed with it. I said Tua's the new Derek Carr. Like, he's just a guy that it's like he constantly he doesn't play bad all the time, but at no point are you like, that's the guy that we drafted. Like, there he is. And that for me was Alex Smith. Like, I think people forget that Alex Smith was the quarterback for the Chiefs when I think they went like 17 weeks without throwing a touchdown to a wide receiver. Like, that never happened before. And somehow, like, Alex Smith doesn't catch more heat for that. That's the thing about it. Like, you're the quarterback. You have to be able to rise to those occasions. And when you look at and I think the Niners, that's why I'm in the same point with Purdy. Like, I can't remember if it was you. I know I've said it a few times. My dad said it to me, and it's true. When I was like, hey, who do you think's going to win the Super Bowl? He's like, who's the best quarterback? Mahomes. It's like, and that, I know we're going to get to it next week with the AFC West, but from that standpoint, dude, every team's just right now trying to beat the Chiefs. Like, for as bad as the Chiefs were last year, they throttled teams in the playoffs and made them look awful. Awful. The funniest thing is the Bills traded their best wide receiver to a team that's just going to lose to the Chiefs in the playoffs. Like, I hate it for the Texans, but honestly, I like the Texans from that standpoint because it's a defensive coach. With DeMeco Ryan, you're going to have to find some defensive schemes to put against Mahomes to be able to fend that off. And you have to have an offense that's going to score. And that's what they're saying. Like, hey, give us those 3 guys. You got Diggs, you've got Tank Dell, and you got Nico Collins, and you give them Joe Mixon and Dalton Schultz with CJ Stroud.
Unreal.
Texans are loaded next year going into it. But then you look at the Chiefs and you're just sitting back from an NFC standpoint. The good thing for Purdy is when you think about like who in the NFC is the best quarterback in the NFC.
Well, for the fact that I got to sit here and even think this long about it, I mean, on paper, I would probably say Dak.
Here recently, I would say he's performed. Like for me, I would say Stafford, just because Stafford's proven it. But the fact that what's scary is I can't argue against Dak, and the fact that he's up there in the conversation, like the NFC does not have quarterbacks. Like, I mean, just think about it. Like, you go NFC West, you got Purdy, You've got Stafford, who I'd say is the guy, the best in the division. Didn't look like Gino coming out of college last year, and Kyler Murray, like Wolf. NFC East, you got Hurts, who I think if he has another bad year is done in Philly.
He's done, yeah.
Daniel Jones, and probably Jaden Daniels going to the Commanders because Sam Howell's out.
Yeah, because Sam's at the Seahawks now. We didn't even bring that up. Yeah.
Well, there was a reason I didn't bring it up because he ain't the answer.
Oh.
And then Dak, and then you go NFC North. It's like Caleb Williams. I don't know who for the Vikings.
Yeah,
you got Sam Darnold.
Yeah, dog.
Like Jordan Love, who I would argue if you gave me the ability to start a franchise based upon how old they are right now in the NFC, that's probably my guy. Like based upon some of the throws he made, I'd probably build a franchise around Love of all the quarterbacks in the NFC. And the Lions, you have Goff, which I think Goff is good. The issue is like something's off that when they can't run the ball, Goff really struggles.
Yeah, he struggles.
And then NFC South, you got Baker,
Kirk,
Young, Kirk. Kirk's up there.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Did you listen to me and Maul's NFC South?
Yeah.
Talk. What do you think about that? Because when Maul brought it up and we got to talking about it, you look at the talent that Minnesota had. How do you think Cousins is going to fare in Atlanta?
Dude, I think he's going to ball out. Like I find it hard to believe with all the weapons that they have on that offense, Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, like, dude, he's got the same weapons that he had in Minnesota, when he had Dalvin out of the backfield.
I mean, he doesn't have... Are you saying Drake London's as good as JJ?
No, I don't, but I think he's got weapons. Like the Atlanta Falcons.
He has weapons. They've never risen to the stage like of Drake London and Kyle Pitts that I'm like, ooh, that's the guy that everyone thinks they should be.
Yeah, but for me, last year with Desmond Ridder, they were still on the verge of winning the NFC South. Like, you're telling me you plug Kirk Cousins in and they're not a sure ticket over Baker? Like, I think it's no question.
It should be. And I think that's what sets it up. It's sort of like Caleb Williams for the Bears. Like, this is setting up to either be their savior or like something that we're going to talk about in 10 years about. Dude,
he might be Chicago's Johnny Manziel. Like,
oh my goodness,
the way that this is panning out, because this dude's got so much pressure already on his shoulders.
Well, he's calling out people on Twitter.
Yeah,
like I've been seeing that he's been responding to a bunch of hate on Twitter, and I'm just like, hey,
shut up.
I hate to tell you this, but Chicago's got them gangsters.
Yeah, like dog, you ever Google Josh Rosen? Google Josh Rogan on draft night.
Oh my god, dude. That's why I'm excited. Drafts, we're sitting here 2 weeks away pretty much from the draft going down. The rumors and everything are great, which I love the most about the draft, because I think it's the one night that my wife gets mad because I'm just like, hey, for the next 4 hours,
I'm doing nothing.
Just watch it. It says the pick's not even in. It's gonna be. It's gonna be here in just a second.
Oh my gosh, they traded.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I think for the Niners, would it be crazy if they traded up in the draft? Yeah. I think when you look at where they're at in the draft, second to last, do I think that there's going to be a wide receiver there that shouldn't be there? Yes.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where these teams stay good. It's because they have guys fall to them that shouldn't be there, and they were able to pick them up. Sort of like the Eagles last year of Jalen Carter. It was like at no point should Jalen Carter, who was regarded as the number one guy, should have fallen to the Eagles. Now, beginning of the season looked like the guy that we all sort of thought he was. Towards the tail end of the season, wasn't showing up quite as much. That, for me, if they can find the right guy and plug him in, good luck. Like, you're going to a good team. Do they need help with linebacker outside of, Greenlaw's getting older and coming off an Achilles? That's going to be tough at that position. We'll see. So,
well, I mean, just as we get ready to close out, I mean, you opened it up talking about speeding. I mean, that's the whole reason why Jalen Carter dropped that low in the draft. My man doesn't know how to drive.
Which I'm not giving these guys a free pass. I'm not doing that. It's more, I think it speaks to this is what everything that I've heard about the draft and we talk about the interviews. This is what they're really trying to figure out. Like the draft, in my opinion, really has nothing to do with the athleticism test. Like I think that's more for the fans to give commentators something to talk about. It gives some teams something to look at. I think especially for guys that weren't as highly touted, you did get to see all the time. I think it gives them a little bit more, and it does help some guys' draft stock, and it hurts a little bit others. But the parts that aren't aired are the biggest parts of them all, which is the interviews with these guys, where guys are getting asked questions like, hey, what's your plan? If you were to be the number 4 pick, what would you do with the money? And just diving in, because a lot of people have been saying this Neighbors guy out of LSU is going to be a problem. They're saying that, hey, from on paper, yes, he looks great, but mentally and other things, like we get some major red flags here. That
already stage 4 CTE.
Oh my goodness! Like
Antonio Brown.
Ooh, no one's gonna get that, dude. I did see a meme that made me laugh, and it said Stephon Diggs after not getting targeted in week 4, and it's Antonio Brown running off the field. I still remember watching, like,
yeah, what is he doing?
The TV was on mute, because I think I was on the phone or something. I had Red Zone on, and I saw that, and I was like, "Is that a fan?" I was like, "Who is that?" So I think I was like talking with my dad. I just hung up. I was like, "Hey, I gotta let you go." Hung up, rewound it, and they were like, "This is Antonio Brown. We're not sure what's going on." I was like, "Oh, my man's gone. He's lost it."
Yeah.
Which I hate it for Brady, because that, if anything, proved he had CTE. It's like you had the greatest quarterback of all time sitting there trying to help you. Like
twice. Yeah.
He got him a Super Bowl. I think people forget, like, when they beat the Chiefs, Antonio Brown caught a touchdown pass.
Yeah, he had a touchdown. Yeah.
Like, he was in, especially when you talk about like throwback guys, it's hard not to look at like the 2010s Steelers with Antonio Brown. I'd argue he was the best wide receiver in the league. Like,
easily.
That dude caught over 100 passes every single year and was unstoppable. The only guy that I would say during his same time period, 2 guys, but it was because of size, and I think both of them were Hall of Famers, and Julio Jones and Megatron. Like, who'd you say?
Mike Evans.
Oh, Evans. I mean, Evans,
he got drafted early, 2010s.
Yeah. Mike has done enough statistically to be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. I think he's put up like 10 or 11 straight 1,000
yard. Yeah.
It's incredible. So there's guys out there, but there's also some guys that later in their career, they start losing it. And that's what teams are trying to evaluate. Do I think Caleb Williams loses it? Yes. I don't know. It's shaping up to be, as we've said multiple times, it's either going to be a tremendous success for the Bears or it's going to get everyone in that organization fired.
Checks.
So
hopefully it's part of the first half. Nothing, man. Like, looking forward to this draft as we get ready to wrap up, with the AFC West and how we see, Jim Harbaugh's future, if he's going to be able to compete with the Chiefs. I don't think it'll be next season. I think it'll be in 2 seasons from now. I think they'll be the new competitor to try to knock off the Chiefs, with another couple of years of aging Mahomes and Kelsey. But yeah, man, obviously Raiders brought in Antonio Pierce, how that's going to work out. And yeah, man, we'll get after it as soon as we can.
Sounds good. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next episode with the AFC West. We'll wrap up the offseason predictions. Then once the draft happens, we'll get a post-draft recap, talk about all the good, bad, sort of give our grades, and we'll for sure call out anything dumb that Mel Kiper posted about. So I look forward to that. But thanks guys for tuning in. Time to pull chalks. We'll see you next time.